Welcome back to your archetype exploration for self-awareness and integration. Today we are exploring the warrior archetype, which is a really important archetype to be aware of in our society at the moment. Hopefully we'll get to talk a bit about that later on. We'll see what comes through. And just an apology for my voice. It's a bit croaky. I was sick earlier this week and it is lingering a little bit. So hopefully we'll get through the whole presentation without me sounding like a frog. So today's agenda will follow similar. If you need to pause at any point, please feel free. If the space I'm giving you to journal or to visualize isn't long enough, please adjust that for yourself. This is your space. So we know about archetypes, but just to run through again, an archetype is a universally understood symbol, pattern of behavior, or prototype that reoccurs across different cultures and time periods, often found in literature, mythology, and psychology. It can be a character, a plot, a theme, or even an image, and it represents fundamental human experiences and emotions. So essentially, archetypes are the building blocks of stories and symbols that resonate with people on a deep subconscious level. And the warrior is a really, really common archetype. We often associate it with the hero of any story, generally the hero, and the warrior will be somewhat conflated in a lot of narratives. Reminding us where we are on the hero's journey, when we explore the warrior, we're in the phase of ego development, which prepares us for the other phases, particularly meeting with soul. So warrior is one of the important archetypes that actually brings us out of childhood, that innocent and orphan archetype dynamic, where we're somewhat dependent on other people, or there's a sense of disempowerment with the innocent and orphan archetypes, but the warrior gives us that empowerment and the skills that we need to actually create what we want to in the world. The warrior. So as usual, most of the quotes I have in here come from Awakening the Heroes Within. There should be lots of links on the page that you're watching this on if you'd like to purchase your own copy. The warrior within each of us calls us to have courage, strength, and integrity, the capacity to make goals and stick to them, and the ability to fight when necessary for ourselves or others. The well-developed internal warrior is necessary above all to protect our boundaries. The warrior myth tells us how human courage and struggle can overcome evil. Warrioring is about claiming our power in the world, establishing our place in the world, and making that world a better place. Already you might start to have some little pings or things resonating for you here about how you associate the warrior. Let's do a breakdown of the warrior. Its goal is to win. Something in the book that was written that I didn't quite want to fit here was to get one's own way. That's the goal of the warrior, to win, to get one's own way. And at a higher level, it's to make a difference through struggle. So that's something that the warrior can do with its unique life path. Its fear is weakness and powerlessness. Its response to the dragon is to slay it, defeat it, or convert it. The task of the warrior is high-level assertiveness, so being able to assert oneself, fighting for what really matters. And fighting for what really matters, that can also have a connotation of fighting for causes that are not just for oneself. So back at the goal, the warrior can get stuck in winning competition and getting one's own sweet way. But the higher task of the warrior is fighting for what truly matters, and that's, I suppose, up to everybody to decide for themselves. But generally, it will also involve the benefit of the world. The gift of the warrior: courage, discipline, skill. So I encourage you just to take a moment now. Just have a breathe. If you want to close your eyes, close your eyes. And kind of sense in your inner landscape the warrior as it shows up in you. and what kind of character your warrior takes on, what resonates for you in your inner landscape. These words: win, make a difference through struggle, weakness, powerlessness, the slaying of a problem, defeat of a problem, or the converting of a problem. Where do these things show up in you, if at all? Or where is the absence of these things? How do you sit with your assertiveness? How do you feel about fighting for what really matters? What would you fight for? And where do you sit with the qualities of courage, discipline, and skill? Just sense that for now. We'll have opportunities to work with it a bit later. All right, so the strengths of the warrior, and as you can see, I've put the strength card of the tarot. Actually, let's go back to the chariot. Where do I have the chariot? So I have two tarot cards that I have in this presentation. The first is the chariot, which is really about charging ahead and going for what one wants, conquest. Whereas strength, it more pertains to inner discipline and inner mastery of self. So as you can see, the lady in the strength card has the infinity symbol up above her head. It's kind of also a symbol of balance in a way, and the flow of energy. And she's not actually oppressing the tiger, but she's in relationship with, tiger. She's in relationship enough with the lion that she can put her hands at its mouth and have a sort of top dog, even caretaking kind of energy around it. She's in charge, but she's not oppressing. That's a whole other conversation, the strength card, but I wanted to highlight that as one of the manifestations of the discipline and the skill and the inner mastery of the warrior. Strengths of the warrior: sticking to goals, turning visions into reality, integrity, strong morals and principles, having a tough skin, self-defense, being solution-focused, being able to solve problems, and protects and respects others. And I've written honor, which relates to the high principles as well. The honor of, the ethical codes of the warrior. So ideally, in a top-notch warrior, the least amount of harm is caused to get one's own way or to complete a mission. There's a respect for the opponent. In any martial art, there's, a set of morals that come with that, and that's a beautiful expression of the warrior, a beautiful way that we could all develop our inner warrior in a healthy way, actually, if we wanted to take it into embodiment. Having that sense of honor and having your honor code, your own connection to your own values, how you choose to show up. Even if the world is unfair, there are certain things that you will and will not do, and there are principles that you will uphold. I suppose that's a bit of the difference between a bit of a villainous warrior, perhaps someone that is willing to compromise moral principle or change their morals from situation to situation. The mature warrior seems to have this energy of, this is what I stand for. I am representing a higher principle than myself, and I will honor that. Something else I want to highlight is turning visions into reality. Without the warrior, the dream of the innocent cannot be actualized. And without the warrior, the orphan kind of stays in this space of being disempowered or resentful against the world. There's not this sense of agency that, well, the world's unfair and I can do something about it and I'm going to choose who I'm going to be. The identity is more conflated with what those people did and they're bad and therefore we'll do this kind of groupthink trap that can come with the orphan. In saying that, obviously the rebel archetype associated with the orphan is kind of moving towards the warrior archetype. As they all do, all the archetypes kind of string onto one another like beads on a necklace or something like that. But it's up to the warrior to take the dreams of the innocent and to take the empathy for humanity that's learned from the orphan and create action from that to make change and to have that vision and go, well, we're going to make it happen. So it's really important in terms of business, in terms of any even altruistic goal that you have. And in Awakening the Heroes Within already, I mean, this book was written in the 60s or 70s or something. I'll have to check that, don't quote me on it. But already there's a lot of talk about how the warriors of the world need to move into action for the environment. And that's a beautiful way to channel the warrior and direction that our warriors need to be used. We need warriors. Warriors get a bit of a bad rap, but we do need warriors if they're fighting for the right things. If you want to take notes at any point of little ping moments that are happening for you, please do. I'm just going to ramble a bit more about things I feel are important to take into account. Tough skin. So in comparison to the orphan, who kind of has this callousness potential, the world hurt, so it put up a wall, and it's in separation that it finds protection, but not necessarily empowerment. Whereas the tough skin of the warrior, there's an empowerment in the separation. It's like, I know who I am, I'm autonomous, these are my values, these are yours, and therefore what you say doesn't have to hurt me, or I'm unaffected, I have an inner resilience because I'm strong in myself. It's a very different form of like separation or aloneness from, or autonomy from the orphan, just to make a distinction there. But it's what we need. It's immunity. Immunity from the words and actions of others. We need to be able not to take things so personally that they destroy us. So having that tough skin is a form of immunity and a healthy boundary where the self is still healthy. Makes me think of the immune system as well. As I was preparing this presentation, I was struggling with the flu, and I was also on my bleed, so my immunity was naturally lower, and I was, absolutely bedridden, like bleeding, like horrible symptoms of the flu. And I was doing so much thinking about the immune system and how fitting it was to be working with the warrior at this time. And I was like in bed, I was so not active. I was very passive, very internal, doing a lot of restorative kind of contemplation. But I was connecting to my inner warrior in the form of the immune system, that self-defense, defending the self. And many of you know that I actually have an autoimmune condition of the thyroid. So that was really interesting for me to kind of go inside and talk to my immune system and be like, hey guys, like what made you switch to like from defending me as the immune system does when it's balanced to actually attacking a part of me, which is what it does when there's autoimmunity present. So that's probably a whole other topic, but I wanted to bring that as an interesting contemplation. We need our inner warrior to fight off colds. I feel as if strong morals and principles are pretty clear, but that might feel strong for you. And solution focused. I guess with the orphan, when it comes up against challenges, it makes conclusions about the world. And then how it has to behave in order to regain safety and protect oneself. Whereas the warrior will go, oh, there's a problem. What's the solution? Or one version of the warrior will do that. and protects others. I won't say anything on that now, but it's a super important point. Pitfalls of the warrior. So, impulsiveness, hot-headed. We've got the Knight of Wands here, which is the Knight is about action. Wands are the fire element and also creativity, so creative energy, which can be associated with impulsiveness or like spontaneity. So we all know people who are a bit hot-headed, a bit impulsiveness, but that makes them passionate and fiery, and we love them for those reasons, but it can also get them into a bunch of trouble. Put your hands up if you've ever done something impulsive before. I'm trying to put my hand up. There we go. Competitiveness. One pitfall of the warrior is to always be in a me against you, rescuer, perpetrator, victim triangle. It relies on war, essentially, the neurobiology of being against someone in order to outlet that energy. So someone that always can never agree with you. No matter what you say, they want to disagree. Devil's advocate kind of thing in a more shadowy way. Or they always have to be the last one to speak, have their idea the biggest. They have to be right. And that's part of the kind of goal-possessed potential of the warrior, to be obsessed by the goal at the cost of being present, at the cost of human relationships, at the cost of their own health. I'm sure many of us can relate to just pushing it, burnout. And this is where we see the warrior a lot in our society today. I'm praying that anybody watching this isn't from a war-torn country. There are a lot of them at the moment. But one way in the West in particular that warrior archetype is expressed is through, relentless capitalistic drive to make money, need to make money, survival. The warrior is really tied in with survival, and just always having the foot on the accelerator. Charge ahead. That Knight of Wands, we never stop, don't rest, and then we burn out. All of our fire's gone. I spoke about the defensiveness and being attack-minded, so hearing everything as a threat. And that's also part to do with the nervous system dysregulation that is collective at the moment, and being sympathetically activated, being in the fight or flight mode where everything's a potential threat. You're not safe. We don't have enough financial security to be out of the red zone. So many ways that we could relate to this, but these are all pitfalls of the warrior archetype. Need to prove oneself or be the best, which leads into kind of a sense of superiority. Obviously, need to prove oneself, be the best. There's ways that this can be expressed through athleticism, which is, to some degree really healthy. It uses that discipline, skill, and evolving humanity, what's possible for humanity, overcoming the obstacles. But it can also be a really unhealthy mental space to be in, that sense of perfectionist and sense of failure if you're anything less than, and also the superiority that you can hold over others, which turns warriors into villains. If the obsession is on power and control, but it's not used for a cause greater than oneself, it can turn into putting other people down, oppressing other people, and just wanting to be the one with the power. With that, need to be the best can come disdain for humanness, so almost like a repulsion or revulsion for vulnerability or weakness, and becoming very critical. Anyone with a strong inner critic might be helpful to start relating to the inner critic as a voice of the warrior, and that we can relate to that voice a bit differently and be like, gosh, you need another mission, bro. You need another mission other than judging and criticizing me or everyone around me. Anyone who has a menstrual cycle, maybe this voice is more turned up during the luteal phase before your period. The inner critic can really rear its head here, and it's also the phase of the menstrual cycle where we're in our fire element, for lack of a better way to say it. That's another workshop. But there's that fire, that ability to critically evaluate everything around you like a warrior would do on the battlefield and be able to go, that's a weakness, that's not going to support things. But what it ends up happening, that amazing perception turns into criticizing everything. And you might do this with your partner. I know I've been guilty of that a lot. Having to rein in the inner critic instead of seeing everything as a weakness or something that needs to be fixed, which is the warrior's job. It wants to solve problems. Being able to like take that and be like, oh, those are all things to be observed. Now what really matters, what energy do I have? What resources do I have? And how can I use them in a way that's going to really get me my goal in the long term? So the forward thinking warrior is able not to just be impulsive and hot headed and be like, this is wrong, we need to fix this, but take into account all of that, almost like, a governor or a general, being able to survey the entire landscape, know when to hold back. That's a huge strategy. Know when to retreat. That's another war strategy. So there's other skills of the warrior that we can develop that can kind of help us mitigate this impulsiveness and burnout and, more of the pitfalls. So there are other opportunities as the warrior to assess the situation with that keen intelligence of the warrior and decide if it's the right moment to act. How we can make these resources last as long as possible, both energetically and materially. What's the true aim? What's really going to get me my goal? If I die now on the battlefield, will I actually be able to achieve my goal? No. So maybe withdrawing is better right now. That's one example. All right, let's move on. Examples of the warrior. So there are many. I chose to go with 3 simple ones. We have the samurai. And I chose the samurai because of that strong honor of the samurai, that, if they dishonored the code or they lost a battle, to my understanding, I haven't done a lot of research on samurai, but they would kill themselves out of honor. That is high honor. And the honor goes beyond their immediate survival, which is part of the warrior task, to fight for something bigger than yourself. The Achilles hero archetype, I chose Achilles because he's, like a really archetypal hero figure. But also because he has the weakness of his heel, the Achilles heel. And it just highlights that relationship between the warrior with immense power and ability and skill and problem solving. And yet we all have a weak spot, or we're all still human. We all have, an orphan that we need to take care of. We all have an innocent that we're protecting. And just highlighting that relationship between the warrior as the protector of those children as well, of those weaknesses. And the more that we can know what those tender spots in ourselves are, the more skilled warrior we can become, and where we can make those more mature choices of when to retreat, when to withdraw, and not just burn ourselves out. Anyone that knows Greek mythology a little bit better than I do probably have some great anecdotes about Achilles. So maybe you'd like to read some after this presentation. And then we have Princess Mononoke. If you haven't seen this film, I highly recommend it. It's by Hayao Miyazaki, beautiful Japanese film producer. And Princess Mononoke grew up with the wolves. And when the forest is in danger, she essentially unites with all of the forest animals and is a savage warrior protecting her forest, protecting the forest of the people that she, or the animals, beings that she loves and has grown up with, and that saved her. So she was an orphan, going back to the orphan archetype and how often these, the connection between the orphan and the warrior. She started out as an orphan, so many heroes do, and she was saved by the kindness and compassion of people, of I keep saying people because I think of them as people, of beings that, had compassion to love something different to them. They could have just abandoned her, but they didn't. And later she comes back as the savior of those beings. Beautiful. Something that is pivotal to the journey of the warrior is the choice between good and evil. So claiming power always brings with it dangers, not the least of which are moral dangers. The problem with the warrior archetype in our time is that so many so-called warriors are not true warriors at all. They are orphans, calming their sense of powerlessness by trying to best or control others. These are pseudo-warriors, not warriors. And I suppose that's where the hero can turn into, or the warrior can turn into the villain. And we all have choices. When we've been hurt, when bad things happen, it's so easy to take the low road, to want to have revenge in a way that undermines our own principles or hurts others unnecessarily. But we all have that choice as warriors. And that isn't just the only example. And in today's society, good and evil is a very grey line. The warrior used to be a lot more connected to like religion and very clear rules of what is wrong and right, whereas today the lines are blurred a lot more, and there's a lot more nuance and a lot more people to take into account, a lot more needs to take into account. So being the warrior becomes harder today because good and evil may not be so clear. Very complex world that we are having to synthesize a lot of information, and that's now part of the warrior's role today. And where I see hope of the warrior actually being able to step a bit away from impulsivity and possibly become a warrior of mindfulness, because there is so much more information for us to take into account and synthesize that we didn't necessarily have access to in the past. And maybe that presents an opportunity for us to become more measured warriors, to actually take a beat, synthesize everything, take the time to understand the deep, complex nuances in things. I don't want to name too many examples. They're all quite alive at the moment. Long-term historical conflicts, being able to synthesize everything to have an informed perspective before simply going out and claiming that this person's evil or these people are evil. And then also being able to draw the line and go, no matter what, this is the principle, this is wrong. Very nuanced job being the warrior, knowing what to fight for. And that's kind of the big battle within. It goes back to, what am I thinking of? The Bhagavad Gita, the story of Krishna and Arjuna on the battlefield, but it's all a metaphor for the battlefield inside. And it's the inner conflict. But they're my family. But this inner conflict, it's necessary for the warrior. And it's something every warrior will have to face in one way or another. So it's kind of part of stepping into that archetype. Embracing the fact that, yes, there will be inner conflict. It would be lovely if it was all clear, no, this is the path. And that's also a part of the warrior. You need to decide, you need to act. But it won't be without challenge. So to a person with only the warrior archetype evidenced in consciousness, every situation seems like a dragon, and the only options are to run, fight, or be destroyed. This is a very difficult psychological landscape in which to live. I just wanted to include that. I spoke a bit to it before, but the state of the nervous system, collectively hypervigilant, all resolving collective trauma after the pandemic and countless of other things. That hypervigilance, the fight or flight activation, the system being out of balance. And on a more personal level, I suppose, like hearing criticism everywhere. See this in relationships a lot as well, where everything your spouse does is like a threat to your ego. And remember, we're in the ego development stage. So while we're messily figuring out our mature warrior, there can be a lot here of learning what is a threat, what isn't, how we can have that tough skin so that not everything is a threat, and we can still maintain a healthy sense of who we are and who other people are, whilst remaining in integrity with ourselves. Yeah, a little bit of a quote there for mental health and how important it is to be doing activities that calm or regulate the nervous system in times of stress, so that we're not just like jumping at everything. Being able to increase the window of tolerance, increase our heart rate variability, our resilience to stress. These are all ways we can bring the warrior back into balance if it's been in overdrive. This is really important. The warrior as it relates to boundaries. Until we develop clear boundaries, we will believe, wrongly or rightly, that we are being held prisoner by someone or something. Maybe read that again for yourself and just take that in. Boundaries are necessary. How we make the boundaries makes all the difference. And it's kind of a cycle in relationships of any kind, that if we aren't clear on our boundaries, people are naturally going to push what we innately feel are our boundaries, the unspoken boundaries. And we can start to feel resentment or feel disempowered or unseen. But that's not necessarily the other person's fault, because they didn't know. And because there's no signal coming from us that this is where the line is. And these things are energetic too. I've actually recently become a great fan of professional contracts because of the energetic container that a contract provides. This will be done, this won't be done. And it doesn't mean it can't evolve, but everybody is having the same perception of where the boundaries are and what is required. And that creates clarity. And then people can respect each other when there's clarity, and people can feel respected by one another. So that's obviously we don't have contracts personally quite as often, but they're there. Whether we're conscious of them or not, whether they're explicit, there will be implicit boundaries and contracts that we have with ourselves that we think we have with other people, but we're actually not on the same page. And what can happen then is that instead of developing a healthy warrior where we're like, actually, this is a boundary I have, and stating that clearly and having a win-win mindset. This we'll talk about a bit later, but one of the higher levels of the warrior is focusing on the win-win. How can I win? How can you win? Instead of having that win-win and clarity, we perpetuate more of the orphan, which feels disempowered, used, usurped, who feels like people aren't seeing them. We perpetuate the wounding when we don't take the time to create clarity in relationships. And it doesn't necessarily have to look like super direct to the point that it's intimidating or non-negotiable. This is a pitfall of the warrior that I've fallen into a million times, being like, I'm standing up for my boundaries. This is direct, but I'm still doing it with aggression. And that's the natural response to protecting oneself, particularly when we're new to this thing. You don't look graceful the moment you start learning how to dance. But finding that healthy, centered warrior of the win-win, this is the clear, this is the clarity of the warrior, the straightness of an arrow to hit what it wants, but also not hurting people in the midst of getting what you want. Ooh, already in my body, like I'm integrating all the skill that requires. So it's actually up to us to present our boundaries, whatever that looks like for you, if we're to be in right relationship with other people. Otherwise, our orphan will project onto others that they're perpetrators, because that's one way the warrior expresses itself, through the perpetrator victim rescuer dynamic. That's a whole other workshop. Maybe I'll do one soon, the drama triangle. But if you do want to look that up, if you haven't heard of that, it's called the drama triangle. And it's kind of a cycle of conflict. And it requires all parties, even if there's just two, to always be in one role of these three roles. You have to step out of the drama triangle. You have to take on a new role. And that new role in this instance would be the healthy warrior. It doesn't need rescuing. It doesn't need to oppress. It's in its healthy ego self, with a higher cause, with strong integrity. Another aspect of the warrior is speaking your truth. The warrior in us often begins the journey towards speaking our truth by attacking the truth of others. That's a pitfall. A nuanced version of the warrior, again, learns how to speak our truth without having to make anyone wrong. And there's vulnerability in speaking your truth, that Achilles heel of the warrior. And yet it's the speaking of the truth that creates the clarity, that creates the clear contracts, dynamics with people, and gives strength. Because you're not compromising your system as much when you're honest with yourself. And when you're honest with others and sticking to that honor of the warrior. If there's any of this shady, trying to get my needs met in a shadowy way, that's more like orphan, innocent landscape. But empowerment actually asks us to hold ourselves with respect, which will require us to hold our vulnerability as well and be, this is my truth. More to say on that, I'm sure. Becoming a high-level warrior. For the highest level warrior, the real battle is always against the enemies within: sloth, cynicism, despair, irresponsibility, denial. The courage to confront the inner dragons is what ultimately allows us to confront the outer dragons with wisdom, self-discipline, and skill. So once again, instead of pointing out to the world and going, this is wrong with you, this is wrong with you, this is wrong with you, being able to point the finger back in and go, where am I not showing up? Where am I not claiming power? Where am I being irresponsible? Where am I being a victim? That's a really important part of the warrior. And I think one of the reasons why coaching, for example, or self-development lifestyles and people and personalities, there's also potential for huge inner critic and burnout, and how capitalism and self-development go so well together, because they're both feeding off the warrior archetype if they're not checked. But there's that sense of personal responsibility, and it can go too far. But what it gives us is the courage to confront the inner dragons and to turn the inner aspects that could turn into villains into strengths. Facing the inner battlefield and hopefully bringing more peace to the kingdom. Quickly run through the levels of the warrior. In its shadow, it's ruthless, unprincipled, has an obsessive need to win, use of power to conquest and oppress others, and a view of all difference as a threat. I find that so profound, and I've lived that in my life in previous chapters. Makes so much sense. The call of the warrior is the confrontation of great challenge or obstacle. So without great obstacle or challenge, the warrior would not be called to come out, a bit like the orphan. The fall from grace of the orphan gives the orphan the gift of empathy and self-reliance. Similarly, the call to confront a great challenge with empowerment to overcome actually brings the warrior out. So we can be grateful for challenges to some degree for helping us develop that inner warrior. Level 1 of the warrior, fight for self or others to prevail. So the cause is not as important as the drive to fight. I didn't know how to say that simply, so let's do it again. It's kind of like fighting for the sake of fighting. The desire to prevail is there. No, we're going to make it. No, I'll do this. But if somebody was to be like, actually, I don't want to fight anymore, or, I don't like where this is going. I don't like the direction it's going. Let's, settle down. And the warrior would be like, no, we have to keep going. This is what you want. And it would lose sight of the process of evolution, of change, the need to reassess, and just be like, no, we're going to do it. And it's so attached to the gaining of the goal. Nonetheless, it's trying to prevail for self or for others. Level 2 is a principled fight for self or others, a fair fight with altruistic intent. So having that ability as the warrior to always come back to your principles and to have your integrity in fight, the honor code, how you treat yourself and how you treat your opponents. Level 3 of the warrior, forthright assertiveness, so that direct, clear communication, going for what the goal is, fighting for what really matters, a goal outside of ourselves. Little or no need for violence. Little or no need for violence. That's part of the skill as well. Violence is often a tactic we use when we don't have any other skills. So part of the skill of the warrior is developing the skills needed for the terrain, the particular battle that you're fighting. What does it require of you? Learn those things. Win-win solutions. Love that. Conflict honestly aired. Once again, the courage to communicate clearly, directly, without shying away, without trying to get our needs met in shadowy, passive-aggressive ways. And honesty is a big principle there. Speaking our truth for the benefit of us and also for the whole. All right. So now is the time that we can do a visualization. Get yourself comfortable. If you need to get a glass of water or anything, do that. And just find yourself in a physical position where you feel as if you can be comfortable. Connect to the breath and just notice any places that you're holding tension. See if you can use the breath to soften those areas of tension, maybe in the shoulder, in the back of the neck. And noticing how your shoulders are, if there's a hunch in the shoulders at all. Is there space for you to roll the shoulders back and have a proud heart? And staying with the physical body, I want you to take on a posture that would feel warrior-like to you. So you don't need to make it too big. You don't need to move arms or anything, but even just in how you're sitting now, what is the posture that the warrior takes on? Is there a more puffedness of the chest? Is there a forward head movement at all, or do you feel anything happening in the core or in the back? And then notice what qualities come to the forefront of your physical experience in this posture. Is there a sense of readiness, strength, energy, vitality. And what's your relationship to power or empowerment as you let these qualities inform your posture? How do you relate to power when your posture is like this? You can relax the body, take a position that feels natural. We're going to go into our imaginal realm, our mind's eye. So see if you can see the landscape of your life with yourself at the center and gain a sense of what you are fighting for in your life. Where are the fights in your life at the moment? Fights in the realm of work or vocation. You can visualize yourself going through your day, making the actions, doing the tasks, doing the thinking. How is your warrior showing up in your work life, in your sense of purpose? And then moving to your relational life, your relationships, be it family, friends, partners, animals, people you interact with in the street. And on a daily basis, what is the trend of how you relate to others? How is the warrior potentially showing up in this space? Moving on to your health and well-being. How is the warrior showing up in your physical health, your approach to mental health? Maybe even with food, exercise. How do you see the warrior being expressed in this domain? Considering the financial domain of your life. Is the warrior present here, and if so, how? And scanning your inner dialogue with yourself every day. How you talk about yourself, how you deal with failures or mistakes or imperfections. And how you motivate yourself to get things done. And does this extend to others outside of you? How do you relate to judgment and criticism? Is that a quality that's high for you? Moving to any other areas of your life that you feel like haven't been covered, and just doing a sweep through your life, through your being, of how the warrior is showing up. Imagine yourself at the center of all of these domains. So all of them are happening around you, the busyness, the action, the strategy, but you are sitting at the center. And you choose to sit down in the middle of all of them. And all the action stops. All the strategy stops. Just sit down in the middle of this great scene that is your life. And watch as the battle ceases. And come to your heart center, be it in your physical body or in your imaginal realm. Perhaps you imagine yourself sitting in the middle of the scene with a glow in your heart space. And ask yourself here, asking the guidance of your heart, what really matters? What really matters? And it's okay if an answer doesn't come immediately. The fact that you're asking this question has already started the unconscious mind to have an answer later on and to start seeing the world through this lens, even unconsciously. But allow yourself to be receptive as the warrior on your battlefield in direct communication with the mystery, allowing yourself to be guided by a higher principle, a higher force that can see beyond the complexities of good and evil. And it may not be a final answer. It may be the first step. And once you have some form of message, crystallize it to a word or a sentence that feels clear. And then go to the domain of your life of vocation, purpose, maybe career. And see yourself in your imaginal realm, walking with your glowing heart that is connected to that principle of what really matters. And see yourself walking into that domain and what might change of how you act in that domain, being informed by this principle. How do you show up different as the warrior when you're anchored with what really matters? Moving to the realm of well-being and health. Walk through that domain informed by what really matters and see how you might change things. And then choose one more realm to go to. And carry that principle with you through that landscape to notice any change in how you would go about things. Coming back to the center of your life, the center of the scene of your life, empowered by this principle of what really matters. You are now going to practice saying no to 3 things that do not truly serve what really matters. Allow the first thing to come to your mind. Maybe it's something you've over-yesed to. Maybe it's a behavior. And say your integral warrior, sacred no. Allow the second thing to manifest. And say your no. And the third, saying no when you're ready. And practice it until it feels empowered and strong, and also connected to your integrity. Respect for yourself, respect for your opponent. Say no. In your mind's eye, imagine turning to the other side where you're standing. Just shift direction with your posture. And this time we're going to be saying our holy yes. So bringing up one thing to your mind that you give your full-bodied warrior hero yes to. And find a few things to do your yes to, or if you struggle to find a yes, take the time to really find something where you feel connected to your holy yes. And practice saying yes, feeling the vitality in your being. When you're ready, you can close up that sacred no, yes exercise and stand in the center of your life. And imagine in your mind eye taking a victorious posture. So maybe it's the Superman pose, or you're standing on top of the hill and you're taking in victory. And allow yourself to feel the sensations of achieving your goals, of being empowered, of having shown your skills, the catharsis of fighting for something that was truly important and overcoming the obstacles so that your kingdom inside and out can experience greater harmony. Connect to the feeling of success. And keeping that sensation of success with you as you're seated, take your warrior posture again, just puffing out your heart a little bit or making any adjustments that help you to connect to that warrior energy. And bringing that sensation with you, bringing the warrior archetype with you. Close the experience however you want. If you want to bring the hands to prayer or do a little Tarzan tap or something. Freestyle space for you to come back to the presentation. Beautiful. So there's a moment now just to take any notes of your experience, anything that felt important or potent. There's a moment now to at least take note of some journaling prompts that might be helpful for you in drawing out this clarity and awareness of the warrior archetype and integrating it. So you can write them down as I say them, and you can do them now, pause the video or get back to them later. Where could I make room for win-wins in my life? Where can I make room for win-wins in my life? What battles do I choose? What battles do I choose? Where can I speak my truth with more clarity? Where can I speak my truth with more clarity? What boundaries could empower me? What boundaries could empower me? What is one goal that I have? And what are 3 steps I can take to get there? So you can take as much time as you want to finish journaling them. For the sake of our video, I just want to direct our attention to what we can take away from the warrior archetype. How do you want to integrate the warrior into your life in a more balanced and psychologically healthier way? What stood out to you about the warrior? Where are you at in relationship to your own warrior? What are you taking away from this presentation? More importantly, how can you change your behavior in some small way or make a choice that can support the embodiment of the warrior in its new evolution. And I will leave that exploration to you. If you do want to have a coaching session around this particular archetype or any of the archetypes we've delved into so far, I am available for coaching sessions. Otherwise, hopefully I will see you at another webinar, live or recorded. And thank you so much for coming.